So for this video, I've done a lot of prep work in advance, and I've just made a bunch of most of the items except for one, just to discuss options before you start. And now there's different lengths of the spiral links that you can make, and you can choose to make them all three the same size, or you can go down to, and I don't recommend this because making them this small is really hard, but this is 3/4 of an inch, this is 1 inch, this is 1 1/4 inches, and this is 1 1/2 inches. And I'm using inches because it works really well using 1/8 of inches, because we are making the links, the loops, approximately 1/8 of an inch in length, and it just seems to work. So that's why I went inches. And for those that are using metric, I recommend, well, you can just see how the math works with this, and then maybe you could modify it to millimeters yourself. But I'm specifically using inches, and I would imagine you could use inches once in a while too. And as far as the leaves go, there's 2 options as well. Now, because the beads are so small, sometimes the holes don't work on 20 gauge wire. My original design, I used 20 gauge wire for the leaves, but it was a hit and miss whether the beads would fit. So for this tutorial, I'm actually using 22 gauge, and then all of the beads fit. So if you don't have 22 gauge, you can use 20 gauge, just maybe all your beads won't fit. So we're using 2mm bicones here, so it's, gives it a little bit more glitz. And I'm also using, just to be more user-friendly, we're using jump rings to put them together instead of making modified ear wires. So we're using regular ear wires. You could use studs with using the jump rings too. Studs, clip-ons, whichever you choose to do. So I'm trying to make this video very user-friendly. So let's get into the supplies now that I've kind of discussed it. So for making the spirals, I'm giving a generic length of 5 inches of 20 gauge wire for each. So you need 6 5-inch pieces of 20 gauge wire. 20 gauge wire in metric is 0.81, and 5 inches is 12.5 centimeters. So, and then when we get to making them, we'll discuss the lengths then, because there's a little bit of a formula to making them. And for making the leaves, you're going to need 22 gauge wire in this instance, and 22 gauge is 0.64 millimeters in metric, and you're going to need 6 7-inch pieces, and 7 inches in metric is 17.5 centimeters. So there's all the supplies needed. Oh, the jump rings can be between 5, you need movement for them to swing a little bit, and they're sitting forward and they're hanging this way. So you could go smaller, but I would recommend between 5 and 6 millimeters in diameter. Yes, diameter. There we go. Okay, and for tools, you need your standard round nose pliers, your chain nose pliers, and your flush cutters. And I recommend, I'm good at eyeballing my links or my loops, but I recommend that you use a permanent marker to mark your pliers. So I'm putting in a permanent marker for that. I recommend a fine tip. This isn't a fine tip, but it'll work. A fine tip kind of like this would be great. But this one isn't a permanent marker. I just wanted to show the tip. I just don't have one on hand right now because I normally don't use them, but I will show you how helpful it will be. You need a pencil as a rondelle to make your leaves. This pencil is 17 millimeters in diameter. So apparently there's 6mm pencils. They're too thin. You need 7 millimeters because, yeah, you need that consistency with the width of the leaves. You will definitely be using a ruler in this. So people that don't like measurements, this is not the tutorial for you because in order to be consistent, we need to definitely do a lot of measuring. And I believe that is everything. So then we can get started. Okay, so let's see, where do we start? Do we start with the spirals or the leaves? How about, oh, I forgot to mention the bicones. These are 2mm bicones, and we use 3 for each one, and there's 6 of them, so 3 times 6 is 18. So if you're using 20 gauge, you need to test them ahead of time for size 18 that actually fit. Okay, so just letting you know, in the description, I will have some links to product to make these, and they are from Amazon, and they are my affiliate links. So when you click on those links, you're actually supporting my channel, and please click on them every day if you can. So that would be great, great, great help with supporting my channel. Okay, so let's move on. And let's make the leaves first. So you have your, I'm using 22 gauge copper wire. This is raw copper, 99% pure. And I actually found that at Amazon, so that's awesome. Okay, and the first thing we have to do is take our ruler. Let's see, I should get everything out of the screen so we're not blurry here. And you're going to bend it at 2 inches, approximately 2 inches. You want it either 2 inches or a little bit more, so don't stress about that part. And then you're going to take your chain nose pliers, and we're going to make this bend as sharply as we can, and then we're going to crimp that together like that. See if I can bring it up close. You want it crimped together as tight as it can go. And then I actually hold the pliers like this and try and spread them apart like a beak. So centered basically. And not, we don't want it 45 degrees. We want it probably more like 30-degree angle here. I'm guesstimating that. And then you're going to hold it like this. You're going to put your pencil in there. And we need to be consistent on all of them with about how they are. So you might want to do all of your wires at this point, set them down, kind of do an assembly line. That way it'll help you be more consistent. And I need to keep this background clear so I stay in focus. Okay, so you're going to put your pencil in there, and you're going to be consistent with all your leaves, and then you're going to wrap around the short wire first on top. So what I mean by on top, that it's sitting above the other wire, and then you're going to bend this, and you're going to make them flat like that. Then you're going to support the leaf with your fingers like this. And you're going to grab your chain nose pliers, and I'm well practiced at this. I can get the center pretty good, but you might have to play to get your center. You want the tip of your leaf and your wire to make a line so that this part is centered. Okay, once you feel comfortable that that's centered, because you can maneuver it, you know, and adjust it at this point, and it's not going to matter. It's not going to affect the looks of your leaf. That part will be hidden. And then once you're happy with that, then hold your leaf together again, nice and tight. We're going to flatten again like this. I'm pushing the pliers against it, making both wires flat. Then we're going to wrap around like this and bring it up. And whoops, sorry, I banged the camera. And over like that. We're going to stop at this point. You're going to check your loop. Is it nice and tight? If you're using 20 gauge, I would bet you it's not. If it's not, then you would, mine is, but if it wasn't, I would take this and try and make that loop a little bit smaller. And then you take your pliers and push it towards the pencil so it's nice and flat. Now at this point, you take that off and you don't need the pencil anymore for this. Okay, so the next step. Now this step is just for 22 gauge. With 20 gauge, you don't need to do this because this is a more frail wire. We are work hardening the leaf a little bit by just gently squeezing on the leaf. Flip it over and do the other side. And that just gives more strength like that. Now it's quite strong. Okay, so now like a clock leaf or clock hand, we're going to bend this straight down like this so it points to the bottom of the leaf. And you're going to take your your flush cutters and snip it to the same length as the bottom of the leaf. And you're going to take your beads out, which I forgot to do. So I'm just going to get a few beads. And you put 3 beads on. Even though more can fit on, please just put 3 beads on. It just looks better. Okay. And now I use my chain nose pliers. You can use your round nose pliers for this too. I like my chain nose pliers. And just bend a loop, having the wire touch itself like that. And then push it down a little bit so it kind of sits level in there like that. Okay. And that leaf is done. So you need to make all 6 of your leaves. Oh, well, the leaf part's done. Now we need to make the long stem. So what I've done, just to make measuring easy, is I've made this length the width of my pliers here in the widest part. If you want shorter earrings, and I forgot to mention this earlier, these are quite long earrings. We'll measure them in the end. So you might want to do things to make your earrings shorter, like trying to make the shorter spirals, etc., etc. But you can also do it so where you just have your standard 3 wrap distance here, which, because it's important to be consistent here, you can use your permanent marker to mark your measurement, how short you want your stem. But I'm doing long stems in this video, which is just this measurement, so I don't have to think about it. But say you wanted it that measurement, and you wouldn't have to think about it. But just to be consistent, you would just mark your pliers. And that permanent marker is going to stay on there. It'll come off eventually, but it will stay on there while you're working through this and maybe several more patterns. And you would just, here, get this centered. You would just go like this then. And that's where you go. And, you know, because I'm using a larger marker, it's wider, but that little bit's a variant shouldn't affect it too much. But to be really consistent, I'm just using the front edge of the mark. And that way you can be really exact. Okay, so, but because I'm using this as my measurement, I am just going to bend it there. And there, that's done. Now you take your round nose pliers, make your typical size loop. And again, if you have a hard time eyeballing what size of loop you have, you can mark your pliers as to the size you want. And then you match it every time. And if you do, you can permanently put that mark there just by every time you use your pliers, just remark it, and you should have a ghost shadow of it before you mark it, so it shouldn't be a problem. So we're going to make a loop, and you want to make sure it's sitting nice and straight on the top, and then you're wrapping as neat as possible. So when I wrap, I'm pulling this way a little bit, but I want to also make sure that I don't go on top of my previous wrap, but I want it nice and tight and neat. And that one I'm starting to go over top. Okay. And this takes practice. And then when you're down to the bottom, bring the wire to the back so your snip off is at the back. And then crimp that end in. Now, if mine's fairly straight, but if yours was, your wrapping is crooked, then just give it a gentle straightening like this and adjust your loop. Feel if it's crimped in enough. I still have a poke, so I need to crimp it in a little bit more until I don't feel anything. There we go. So that's done, and that's how you do all of them. You need to do 6 of them. So pause the video and finish your 6. And let's get this out of the screen. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the spiral loops. So first off, you need to, you need to decide the size you want. And then the next thing you need to do, once you decide that, is you need to practice making this top loop. Well, ad loop. This loop needs to be 1/8 of an inch in length from that end to where it touches. I'll show you actually. So for me, it's about there on my pliers. So I'm going to make, first it makes a P loop, and then you have to make, that might have been too big, an I loop, and then you take your ruler and see, and yes, it's 1/8 of an inch here. I will see if I can zoom in. It's 1/8 of an inch. So our formula is whatever length you need to make, first you make this 1/8 of an inch loop, then you take, let's say, actually the one I need to make is making 1 1/4 inches. So if you want, I can go here. 1 1/4 inches is what I'm making because I've already made 2 1.5 inches. And so that's 2 1/2 or 1 1/2. We want 1 1/4. That's right there. And then we need to bend this wire at 1/4 of an eighth, sorry, 1/8 of an inch shorter than the length we want, because we need to make room for the next loop. So we're bending for that loop right there. So 1 1/8 inch is where the bend is, and that's from the edge of the loop to there. That's your formula. Okay, so always bend it 1/8 of an inch shorter than what you want, and that makes room for the next loop, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think you should write that down, you know, because in your wording you'll understand it more than me. So you're going to make your loop first, then measure it 1/8 of an inch shorter than the length you want your spiral to be and bend it at that point. Okay, so that's just demonstrating it. So you need to practice, you need to find where on your pliers that 1/8 of an inch is. And then you need to take your permanent marker, and I'm just going to move that over. It was right here on my pliers. So if I use the pliers consistently at that point, my loop should be the right size. Okay, so now let's go through making the actual one. So first you're going to make your eye pin. And again, we want that marker size. So we want it, there's our eye loop. Then you're going to take your pliers and straighten out this to make it a, well, actually that was a P loop. Now it's an eye loop because it's making an eye, but you want to center that loop as well. So it looks like that. Okay, and next, I do say okay a lot, don't I? We want to flatten this because it tends to bend. So that's all you need to do. Now this one needs to be 1 1/4 inches in length because I have all the other ones made. So you're going to make, if you choose, 2 1 1/2 inches, 2 1 1/4 inches, and 2 1 inch. But you could also do, if you wanted to do shorter ones, you could do 3/4 of an inch. It's just a little bit more challenging to do the center part for you. But by all means, give it a try. And by the way, I wouldn't really classify this as a beginner tutorial. I would say it's an intermediate. Although, I mean, there's beginners out there that can do things like this. So you just don't want to limit yourself as well. Okay, so I'm making 1 1/4 inch length. So this is an 1/8 of an inch. See, worked out perfectly. Whoops, I should be in camera, sorry. Cat hair, and I'm not sure if you heard my cat a little while ago. She's running around. And I need to measure this. I want 1 1/4 inches. I need to go 1/8 of an inch shorter, putting my fingers there and giving it a bend, sharp bend at that point. And now I need to take my pliers at the mark, make my loop, and make sure it's a pretty looking eye loop. So I had to do some adjusting, and you want it nice and tight on that to be precise on your size. And you're going to take your pliers out at that point, and we're going to do some work hardening and some checks. So you see how the wire bent a little bit here? I'm just going to straighten it out, and I'm going to work harden this wire by snapping on it. Not too hard, you don't want to mar it too much, but a little bit's okay. Make it all flat. And now we want these loops to be perpendicular to each other, not, we want them facing the opposite direction. So twist it, because when you're measuring it, you tend to make them the same way. So I always just say, just, you know, there's no worries doing it then, but make sure they're right now. And now we're ready to start doing the wrap. So now you need your round nose pliers again. Put it snugly in your pliers. That means put it as far as it can go. Hold, clamp down. Okay, so I had a bit of technical difficulty there, so I had to kind of do another one and catch us up. So where we're at, I think approximately, is we just finished the loop, and we are now just work hardening it by snapping it, making it so the loops are opposite directions. And it doesn't matter where the opening is. Each one could be different because it's hidden. So don't stress about that. And then once you're happy with that being nice and straight, and when you're doing your wrapping, it's going to curve it anyways. This will just help it to stay as straight as possible. So now we're putting the pliers in nice and tight, and that means pushing it all the way down and holding it firmly, and we're going to wrap around just once in the normal way. I'm hoping I'm in focus, because that's what the issue was last time. I wasn't in focus, and I want to make sure I'm in focus for this. Okay, so you notice how right now this wire is going straight, because that's the normal way of wrapping it. Now to do the spiral, we want to move it. Right now it's sitting at a 90-degree angle. We want, I'm going to move this out of the way so it's not blurry. We want to bend this to a 45-degree angle. And so those that aren't good with angles, 45 is just halfway between here and there. So it's just the halfway point. So it's going like that. Okay, and now you're going to support the inner wire with your thumb. And well, you're going to be twisting around. So you're always trying to support that inner wire as well as pushing this down, and you're twisting your hand like this. Now I'm going from underneath, and I'm going to support the inner wire with my finger and pushing with my thumb. So you're going to alternate like that until you get down to this loop. And this can be challenging. This is the hardest part of these earrings. And you're trying to keep that inner wire as straight as possible, which it's impossible not to have one or two curves. And don't stress about it, that's normal. So once you're down at that loop like I am here, now we straighten the wire again so that it's straight. And we're going to wrap one loop totally around to finish it off and give it, you know, the strength. So believe it or not, these are fairly strong, so don't stress about that part. And now snip it off. This is where the flush cutters like this are good, because they get into those tight spaces. And I should have the link down there to find a pair like similar to that in my Amazon affiliate link. And then crimp it in so that you don't have any sharp edges. You might take a couple of tries, just make sure it's not sharp. And there it is done. And now let's see how accurate we were in our length. This should be 1 1/4 inches. And it's pretty much exactly 1 1/4 inches. So it's going to take some practice to make them. But in this type of earrings, if you're a little bit off, it's not going to be evident like in some cases. So there you go. Now you know how to make these spiral links. And they're lots of fun. You can use them in all kinds of designs. Okay, so now that you need to make all your different lengths. So remember, the formula is whatever length you want. After you make your loop, it's just 1/8 of an inch shorter than the length that you want. Okay, so we're going to assemble everything now. We're going to start off with putting the leaves onto the twist links. So you're going to only one of these open up, so you got to figure out which one it is. Open it up sideways so you're not ruining the circle. I'm just gonna zoom in a little bit more. Okay, and then you're going, and it doesn't matter which way the leaf is because there's no front or back on the link. So, and then just close it by just bending it back like this. If it's got an opening, then just scooch it in like that. Yeah, scooch is a technical term. And then that first one's done, and we'll just continue, not using that one, with all of them. So I will do that, and I will pause, and you can continue as well. Okay, so I have them all on. The next step is to put them on your jump ring. So you're opening up your jump ring. You can use 2 pliers. I'm using my hand. It's easy enough to do with 2 pliers though. And we're doing it in order. You're going to want your, it doesn't matter on your jump ring right now as to what order you put it in. You can but the shortest to the longest, and you want them all facing the right direction. So this is backwards, so I want to put this one on backwards too, like so, because you know what the front of the leaf is, right? So it's all according to the front of the leaf. Okay, so I have them like so, and we might as well put the ear wire on at the same time. That way we don't have to open and close an extra loop. So this one has it right to left, and we're going to put the ear wire on the right hand side. I guess it doesn't matter. So the next one will go the opposite way. So we have the longest at the left. The next one, we'll make sure the longest is at the right, just so your earrings are reversed. And then snugly close your jump ring, and that one's done. And just make sure they're sitting right. Yep. They flip around on you though, they really do. So, but that's okay. They dangle quite nicely. Okay, so that one had the longest on the left. With this one, we want the longest on the right. So we're going to make sure the leaves are facing forward. And I dropped one. Okay, so longest on the right. That means we're going to start with the shortest first. The leaves actually sit sideways. Oh, there we go. They tend to change their mind. If the leaves are sitting sideways, you can always flip the top loop around on in the ear wire. So I'm thinking they are. So that can be something, an adjustment we will do. So now I'm going the next longer one. And if you put one on backwards, that's the answer too, is you just flip that loop around. It's not going to hurt anything. So that's the adjustment we're going to do. And now, okay, got the longest on the right hand side, and now put the ear wire on. Okay, so this one should sit. No, it ended up being, how did I do that? Okay, so I just have to reverse that. And I'm going to open up the ear wire. It might be easier just to open up the ear wire. And then I'm going to adjust my leaves so they sit forward. Okay, so I need, this is complicated because you, okay, so what you got to do is you got to grab your links like this, hold them, and then figure out how. So that one's got to flip around completely. So they are sitting flush. No, it's not. They're all sitting different directions. Okay, so this one, I'm going to just lay it down like this and pull it straight like that. This one needs to be flipped around. And just I'm just turning the leaf around. That's all I'm doing, like that. And then that's going to face the same right direction. So that's what you have to do with each of them, is you just have to make sure, adjust it and make sure they're sitting in the right direction. But they're going to spin around anyways, so it doesn't have a huge impact. But I mean, of course, we want to be perfectionists to some degree, don't we? So there, they're actually sitting quite perfectly there. How about this one? This one's sitting a little off. I'm going to, it's sitting on its, it's like that, it's like that. Yep, this one needs to go half, like that. So, and then once you got that done, they're pretty much self-adjusting. Other than that, they're very pretty when they dangle. And pictures, when you spread them out like this, just does not do them justice at all. They're really elegant once you have them on. Okay, so I promised you that we would measure them in the end to see how long these ones were with the measurements I have. Okay, so let's spread it out as best we can. So from the top of the ear wire, that's what I always do my measurements from. Top of the ear wire to the base, they are almost precisely 3 inches long. And there. I love them. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me in this video. God bless. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hi, this is Cheryl St.Pierre. In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to make these lengthy feathery leaf earrings. That's what I should call them, feathery leaf earrings. And they have quite a few components to them that take a little bit of time and practice. So I would, a beginner could make these earrings, but it'd be very challenging. I would call this an intermediate tutorial, just so that you know. And there's quite a few options that you can do, and we will go through that. And yeah, let's, oh, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you like this video, and we will go on from here. So let's make these earrings.